Okay, for quite a while, I was using gigs as an opportunity to kind of experiment with different kind of setups and check whether a piece of gear worked for me and that sort of thing. And I think part of that is trying to keep like a repetitive covers gig interesting. So often, particularly like last year, the last couple of years, I was often gigging basically most weekends with the same band, playing more or less the same set list. More recently this summer, I've had like a couple of, well, quite a lot of gigs where there's actually quite a lot of more material to learn, and kind of thinking about the gear less, and having to think about what might be appropriate on the gig. And for that reason, I've kind of stepped away from the kind of hybrid pedal board amp and HX Stomp rig and kind of paired things back to the HX Stomp. I kind of wanted to do a video on this because I've done a couple of gigs now with this kind of setup that is somewhat new again. So I just kind of wanted to check in on that. If you wanted to check out this preset, it's in the cover band presets. I'm going to update this one as well because I made a couple of tweaks to this preset for it to work live. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. To start this first with the biggest obstacle here, and that has been actually with the Fender Tone Master getting enough volume out of here. So basically, yeah, I use either the send or the headphone output. What I've done is actually set the send to be post the amp. So I had two kind of ideas with this. One was that if I put the send before the amp, this entire preset can go in front of an amplifier. Or if I decide, right, I'm going to use the Fender Tone Master, I could just move that send to the end of the chain, right? So you could have the whole chain with the amplifier, which is going to front of house. You could set that send to be just before that and send it in front of an amp, set it all after it, and that goes into the Fender Tone Master Pro. So it's kind of flexible in that way. But yeah, that was the first thing, is that I had like a couple of like the starts of gigs where it's like I'm not getting enough volume out of the Tone Master, and that's kind of the same thing with the power cab as well. If it's kind of too quiet, it just feels super weak, and like it doesn't seem to be enjoyable tone-wise either. So you need to make sure that you're sending. So on my send on this, you might find that the gain is about +12 or something like that. It's also a little bit tricky to balance kind of the volumes. I've tried to do it at home, but actually it worked a little bit better doing it on the gig. But balancing the levels between clean and then drive and then your lead tone can be quite tricky. There's a keyboard player in my normal band, so the lead tone needs to jump up a bit more versus if it was just like in a normal kind of, not normal, but in a trio setting or just one guitar setting, you might not want to boost as much as that, but kind of works, I think, to boost your gain, not gain, but volume overall with a solo quite a chunk. And what I'm really liking about this is that it really is quite a simple setup. Alec, born from the MIDI Mad Scientist Club, if you've not gone over there to check out things like getting into the nitty gritty with the MIDI side of Helix stuff, that's a really good idea. He's also got kind of Boss Katana groups and stuff like that, and Boss Air groups, which you might be interested in. He had asked, like, is this enough? Like, aren't you kind of limiting yourself? And to an extent, yes. And I guess that's kind of the point, though, is that I wanted something simpler. A foot switch changes my sounds, and I have basically 3 sounds for a gig: your rhythm, your lead, and your clean, which you heard in the intro. Aside from that, there's only like a light sprinkling of other stuff that I really need, and I can get by without them for the sake of having a rig which is flexible in some regards, simple, easy to pack, and crucially, what really kicked this into touch for me was that it's easy for me to have a backup. So I could just have 2 of these dual type foot switches, 2 HX Stomps, which I got, and I'm basically safe for the gig. Whereas I had, with this other kind of setup, it was a bit like, well, what would I do if this happened? What would I do if that happened? What if the battery powered pedal board kind of goes down? What if I forget, for instance, to take a spare HX Stomp power supply? So that happened because I was getting used to the idea of just taking the powered pedal board, and I was kind of thinking in a way that wasn't particularly safe for being backed up. So it's also really nice to have a situation where I'm kind of not having to press on 2 or 3 switches to take a solo, just take the one lead. I really do like that as a feature of modeling, I guess. In terms of footprint, it is smaller than the Helix, and sometimes that is important for small stages where, you know, you might, like our gig on Saturday, we put kind of in the corner of a massive country house, but like we're in just a corner of a small room. Sometimes it does feel handy to have a smaller rig. The reason that I thought I could gig just the HX Stomp again was I was on a gig with a bass player who was just playing a Sans amp, and I kind of looked at the simplicity of the rig and thought he's onto something here. Anyway, let's just quickly go through some of the tones. If I need to augment the rig, this Donna Triple Threat that they sent me, that I did a demo of, actually I took it on the gig the other day and it was really handy. So yeah, this isn't necessarily a total, you know, go out and buy one of these type deals, but just an additional 3 foot switches that kind of match up nicely. This particular model has an echo, a phaser, and a distortion, and that was handy because this is like a tape style echo, or like an analog style echo, I should say, or delay, which is a little bit different to the digital stuff that I would normally use in the HX Stomp. The phaser is really handy to have some modulation that kind of goes, right, you know, you could use that for like funky lead parts. And then the distortion, just another kind of gain stage, really handy. So in terms of a portable rig that is tiny and modular, like that doesn't have to be in there, I can still get through the gig. That's pretty cool. So over in Snapshot 3 is my clean. You hear there's quite a bit of compression. That is to basically work live. It might be a bit too much, maybe, I don't know. But there, it's... And I can kick on my delay with the extra foot switch if I plug it in. Sort of a super affected delay, or I've got an additional So that kicks on, I think, a Zen drive. Yeah, Diana drive. Okay, and then I've got my rhythm tone, which is based on that same clean tone, but with a Timmy up front. So you want your rhythm and clean to be like maybe a rhythm, as in like chunky rhythm, to be a slight lift in gain, not just gain, but also volume. If I want, I can kick on the Zen drive too. It's kind of cool, and then I've got my lead tone, which kicks on a bit of delay. Or I can kick the left-hand side of my foot switch, and then that kicks that off. If I have the Jack White Donna collaboration thing as well, I can also get on my clean a phaser. An echo. Darker style echo, and then also another drive. Drive that's maybe a little bit of a different flavour. If I don't want as much of a lift. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that in general, and I feel like if I want that little bit of extra kind of stuff for the gig, then something like the Donna Triple Threat might be a good shout. That also works incredibly well as like a backup to have in the case in general, and then another HX Stomp as backup. This extra foot switching kind of basically gives me some of the benefit of like the HX Stomp XL, which might be a shout as well if you were looking for that sort of thing, but I'm sort of maxed out in terms of blocks on the HX Stomp, so an extra foot switch to switch what was basically my thinking with the HX Stomp XL by the time that I dialed this in to where I needed it. This switch here, I'm switching overdrive, and this switch here, switching delay, so it's just basically set up as 2 extra foot switches. I think it's quite a cool little rig. It's working nicely for me. I'm going to stick with it for a bit. Someone has asked if I can try and gig the blue guitar, so I might do that. I think this will be the core of my basic rig now, and I either take an amp with me or I don't, or I take the Fender Tone Master FR12, or if it's a function gig with in-ears, like there are certain gigs now where taking an amp in general is just not the done thing. Those types of gigs, just the HX Stomp. This, if I need it, it's a super simple rig, easy for me to back up, and yeah, I'm gradually kind of dialing it in, making little tweaks, which I'll continue to put in the folder. If you want to check that out, check out the Cordy cover band presets folder. That's where this HX Stomp preset will live. I might make a Helix version which has kind of more kitchen sinks like shoved in front of the main kind of same principle. See if there's any interest in that. Cheers for stopping by.